Welcome to another edition of Inside the Mind of a Gimp. This is Volume 8, and we're going to be talking about Christian Gimps. Now, we're in between games right now, so you're catching us in a transitional grief state right now, because we're waiting on a few games to come out. Um, but right now, there's really nothing going on. So I thought that I would go into the mind of a Gimp as far as some Christian grief. I mean, it's hard. It's hard. It takes a lot of tenacity and discipline, and dedication to grief a Gimp online in an online game. But to grief an entire religion, that's easy. So I'm going to do it right now. What I'm going to prove to you Christian Gimps is that the guy you follow around, the Jesus guy, he was never crucified. He never died on the cross. And you might be thinking, well, how in the fuck is this guy going to prove that? Is he just going to talk shit? Is he just one of these guys that's just gonna? I mean, you guys know me from griefing. You know, when I say something, that's it. If I say I'm gonna shut a server down, that's it. We shut it down. It dies. The game goes away. So, in my case, in particular, when I grief anything, it's gonna be based in fact. All right. So, if I'm gonna grief the entire religion of Christianity, the way you do that is by using their own book that they believe in, their Bible, and their verses, word for word, not adding anything, just reciting their own shit out of their book. Now, the biggest problem when you do this, or when religions clash, so like when, say, Islam clashes with Christianity, and the Muslims, they try to bring the Quran, and then they recite out of the Quran, and then the Christian Gimps, they recite out of the Bible, and then it doesn't work because neither one believes the other's book is the truth. So, like in my case, as a griefer, our book is the Book of Grief, and inside Crom rules supreme and lays down APOC after APOC of just absolute griefer intensity. Six trumps the prophet, and I could tell you the whole story of the Book of Grief. But the Christian Gimp would reject the Book of Grief as the truth, which we know that it is the absolute and utter truth as far as grief is concerned in the universe, is the Book of Grief. So that's undisputed. I mean, you can't. I mean, but they're too stupid. So what I'm gonna do is use their book and their verses to prove that this guy that they believe in was never crucified. And if he was never crucified, then their whole system is garbage. And I'm going to prove it today. So, I mean, let's start by saying that this all started for me when I was like, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old, and I was, my parents would make me go to church. Like, back then they used to make, I mean, kids, it wasn't out of the ordinary to go to church. So I would go, and when I was there, I was hearing this weird shit. I mean, I'm hearing, wine, water, fish, a couple pieces of bread, people eating into shit, curing lepers, and just weird shit. And I was like, wait a minute, man, this fucking shit. Like, this is the wildest shit I've ever heard. I might be forced to have to read this myself just to make sure. I mean, because this fucking jackoff that's up here every Sunday talking weird shit, and no one's saying anything. They're all just, yeah, we believe it, yeah, that's what happened. None of these fucking guys were there. I mean, I don't know anyone that could see that far. You know what I mean? 4 or 5 thousand years ago, I can't even see a block. I don't even know what's going on a block away. I mean, these fucking guys, you know what I mean? So I start reading it. I mean, I'm like 7 or 8, so the thuses and the here tos and the all the weird shit that they say. I mean, it was hard. The saith unto them and shit like that. I mean, that was it was difficult as a 7 or 8 year old to navigate that book. And why in the fuck is the book written like that? You know what I mean? So let's go into that. First thing is the Roman Catholic Bible has 73 books inside. The King James Version was written in 1612 and has 66 books inside. So why is there 7 fucking books taken out of the King James Bible? Because when they rewrote it, they declared the 7 books apocrypha, which just means it's not trusted. So just like when we're online and a Gimp jumps onto a forum and he's like, "Oh, these HOGG guys, they didn't, do anything to me, and that, they'll never grief me," and stuff like that. Just like that. I mean, through the fucking ages, there's always a Gimp. So in this case, Roman Catholic Bible is 73 fucking books inside. King James Version is 66. They said, hey, these 7 Gimps, they're not trusted. We can't substantiate shit. They're just jumping on the forums. I mean, back then, right? They're jumping on the forums, and these fucking books, we can't. Let's just rip them out. So, your book, your Bible, the one you believe in, most Gimps have the King James Bible, which is, like I said, that shit was redone 1612, 66 fucking books inside, right? So the first thing let's define is what is crucifixion. Like if I had to look this shit up just to make sure, because in my words it's going to be different, but it's kind of the same thing. So it says the execution of a person by nailing or binding them to the cross. All right. So that means he dies, right? So to me, it just means to fix or hang a person on a cross until they die. To crucify means to kill. I mean, as long as we can both agree on that. Like, you don't just get crucified, then you get down, and then you run around and eat a sandwich. I mean, if they throw you up on that shit, you don't come down unless you're dead, right? You come down dead. You're not running around and then we're playing basketball. So now that we've established that to crucify means to die, it means to kill, right? Execution. That doesn't mean jump, get down, go to the gym and shit. That means you die. So, I think it's universal. We can all agree that that means to kill. So, your guy, Jesus Christ, after the alleged crucifixion, returns to that upper room. And I say alleged because he wasn't crucified, and I'm going to prove it. So they always talk about going to this upper room. So then I had to look that shit up when I was like 7, 8 years old, and I found it in Luke 24:36 through 37. Okay, and you can look it up, and I'm going to put this shit on the screen. I'm doing all this in one take because grief in an entire religion is easy shit. Okay, now if I was talking about grief in a dude or whatever, we might have multiple takes. But this is just grief in a religion, and I can do that shit so easy. I don't need. This is one take type. This is a one shot kill right here. All right, so in Luke 24:36 through 37, he says, and I'm quoting out of your shit. This is your Bible, not my shit. This is your shit. This isn't the book of grief. So I'm quoting out of your book. And as they thus spake, right, spake, look at that shit. Jesus himself stood in the midst of them, and saith unto them, Peace be unto you. But they were terrified and affrighted, and supposed that they had seen a spirit. But they were terrified and affrighted, and supposed that they had seen it. Now, why were they terrified? Now, here's the thing. I don't know if you ever noticed, but when Muslims or Arabs and Jews, when they greet each other, they'll embrace each other, right? They'll hug each other. A little kiss on each cheek. I mean, that's just the way they do that shit. You know what I mean? But in this case, they didn't do it. Why would they not? I mean, this is their guy, right? This is Jesus. Why aren't they running up to him and embracing him and doing that shit? Why were they terrified? They were terrified because of hearsay, man. The disciples had heard that the master had been hung on the cross. So they thought that he was dead. They expected him to be stinking because he had been dead for 3 days, right? In the tomb. So that's why they were terrified. And that always got me like, why would they be terrified to see this guy? I mean, they love this guy, right? It's because they thought he was dead. And because of hearsay, because they didn't see it themselves. And the reason we know that is because in Mark 14:50, it says in your book, this is what it says, and they all forsook him and fled. This means their knowledge was not from eyewitnesses, but from hearsay. They heard that this fucking guy had been put on the cross. They didn't see it with their own eyes, right? And they all forsook him and fled. All. What does all mean? It means all, right? Not one or two motherfuckers, staggering around looking through the bushes. I mean, if we're all speaking English and we agree that we're doing that shit, all means everything. All means all of them. So now I'm going to go back to the frightened. So Jesus notices that they're frightened, and he's like, man, I got to wake these gimps up. Like, why are they fucking scared of me? What the? They're treating me like I died or some shit, and I'm not, everything's fine. And so in Luke 24:38, he says, behold my hands and my feet, that it is I, myself. Handle me and see. For a spirit hath not flesh and bones, and ye see me have. So Jesus says this to the disciples because they thought he was a spirit. He wasn't. He's like, dude, handle me and see. Like, look, feel my hands, you fuck. Like, touch me. Right? I'm a spirit, doesn't have flesh and bones. You can't, if I'm a spirit, you just put your hands, if I'm Casper the Friendly Ghost and shit, you're putting your hands through me. You're not feeling anything if you grab for me, right? And so they think he's a spirit, so they're, he's like, hey, touch me. Look, I'm not a fucking spirit. I didn't die. I don't know what you got, what's going on, or what you guys have been drinking and shit since I've been gone, but I'm the same motherfucker. And he's like, so it's universally accepted, right? It's an axiomatic truth that spirits, they don't have flesh or bones. And why would Jesus make this such a serious point, like a point of emphasis, or hammer this down, is because the disciples thought he had died and had risen from the dead. That's why they thought he was a spirit, because of what they had heard. They didn't see it, because, right, we went back to that 1450, they forsook him and fled. They ran like bitches. They didn't see shit firsthand. And so let's go ahead to which would be way before Paul. Let's go Luke 24:41, and we're gonna talk about why he keeps reiterating about, hey, look, I'm not a spirit. Okay, and so we gotta define what a spirit is in your book. So in Luke 24:41, it says this, and I'm quoting, and while they yet believed not for joy, that means they were overjoyed. They weren't just for joy, they were overjoyed, and wondered, he said unto them, have ye here any meat? And they gave him a piece of broiled fish and of a honeycomb. And he took it, and he did eat before them. Now, why would he do that? Why would he say, hey man, you guys got any fucking food? I mean, this guy's been eating it. This is some local food. I mean, this guy knows what the fuck. I mean, he's been eating it his whole life. You know what I mean? It's nothing special. It's not some nice restaurant where he's like, holy shit, I really like the bread and wine here. You know what I mean? He says this to reinforce the point that he is not resurrected, right? And to show him that a spirit body does not need food or drink to survive, but a mortal body does. Like, I'm still here, man. I gotta eat and drink. You guys are frightened and shit. I let you touch me, and now I'm saying I need to eat some food. I mean, I don't know what more I can do to prove to you that I'm not dead, you know. So now that's in Luke. Now, in Paul, this is after, way after Luke, Matthew, and all that. Paul talks about the spirit body. So Paul tells you in Corinthians, which is titled in most Bibles, the resurrection of Christ. That's the title that you guys put on there. Alright? So Paul talks about the resurrection of Christ. He speaks about the spirit body. And this is what he says, I'll quote in 1 Corinthians 15:4. And that he was buried, and that he rose again the third day according to the scriptures. Paul was not referring to Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, because Paul was saying this 56 years after the crucifixion. He's speaking of his knowledge of the Old Testament. It's not firsthand. 56 years after, he's saying this shit. So he wasn't there either. And this is what he says right here in 1 Corinthians 15:14. He says, and if Christ not be risen, right? then is our preaching vain, and your faith is also vain. So what that mean? What does that mean? Vain. Paul's saying this because if Christ was not crucified, then Christianity is in vain, right? It's garbage. It's bullshit. Modern day term for vain would be bullshit. So he's like, hey man, if this guy wasn't put on the cross and died, crucified for our shit, then this is some bullshit. So your book, this I'm not adding nothing to it. Now later on in your book, he says 1535. But some man will say, how are the dead raised up? And with what body do they come? Paul asks this is a rhetorical question that Paul's asking, and he answers his own question in verse 42. And here it is. So also is the resurrection of the dead. It is sown, which means buried, in corruption. It is raised in incorruption. It is sown in dishonor. It is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness. It is raised in power. It is sown a natural body. It is raised a spiritual body. There is a natural body and there is a spiritual body. Paul says sown, meaning buried, a mortal body, and raised a spiritual body. Paul is trying to teach you Gimps that when a body is resurrected, it is resurrected a spiritual body. Paul bases all of his 14 books on this premise, that there's two bodies. One while we're here on earth, and then when you die, you go to heaven, you become a spiritual body. And so he writes 14 books. Now, you might think, well, 14 books, who gives a shit? Well, 14 books, there's only 27 books in the New Testament. Paul wrote 14 of them. I mean, that's more than half of the New Testament. So they give, these Gimps, they give a lot of weight to this guy, so I bring him up. Now, this is another, I'm trying to show two different people saying spirit body and where it says it in the book. So, way before this, Jesus himself talks about the spirit body, and he does in Luke. Now, this is way before Paul, but I'm jumping around to just show you that this shit's all, it's replete through the Bible, right? So, Luke 20, 28 through 36 says this, I'm quoting. Well, before I quote that, I want to tell you what's going on here. Jews come to trick Jesus with riddles, okay? So these fucking guys think they're going to come and trick him because if he's God, I mean, they can't trick him, right? And so they give him this riddle about this fucking guy, or this chick, that has 7 husbands, and they all have the same wife, but they're 7 brothers. Which was okay back then because as long as you didn't have a kid, if you're with the chick, married, you die, and there's no kid, then your brother could marry her, and if he doesn't have a kid, then the next one can marry her, and if he doesn't have a kid, then the next one, I mean, that's how they did shit back then. A little different. So they come with him with this fucking riddle. In Luke 20, 28 through 36, I'm quoting now, it says, saying master, what do you mean, what is master? Bishop, rabbi. Moses wrote unto us, if any man's brother die having a wife, and he die without children, that his brother should take his wife and raise up seed unto his brother. So that means as long as he doesn't have a kid. There were therefore 7 brethren, 7 brothers, and the first took a wife and died without children, and the second took her to wife, and he died childless, and the third took her, and in like manner the 7 also, and they left no children. So all 7 of them were with her, never had a kid. They all died. Last of all, the woman died also. Therefore, in the resurrection, whose wife of them is she? For 7 had her to wife. So 7 guys have her on earth. They each die. Finally, she dies. They all pop up in heaven. Whose wife is it? I mean, you got 7 meatball Gimps fucking, that's my chick, fighting and shit, and their brothers are fighting anyway and shit. You can see them, elbowing and fucking headlocking each other trying to grab this chick. And so in 34, so Luke 20:34, Jesus answers and he says, and Jesus answered, he said unto them, the children of this world marry and are given in marriage, but they which shall be accounted worthy to obtain that world and the resurrection from the dead neither marry nor are given in marriage. And then in 36, the most important part, it says, neither can they die any more, for they are equal unto the angels. and are the children of God, being the children of the resurrection. So Jesus tells them this because they will be immortalized without need of food, drink, sex, shelter, rest, etc., because they will be spiritualized. So neither can they die anymore, for they are equal unto the angels. So I just went over. Paul says spirits. Jesus says spirits. Your Gimp ass says spirits. We can all agree that you believe mortal body, spiritual body. And that should be enough for you, Gimp. Right there, and you can look that shit up. I already gave you everything. Because if Jesus tells the disciples, I am flesh and bones, not resurrected. He tells them, I am flesh and bones, not resurrected. Jesus is not a spirit, so how can he be resurrected? He isn't, because he didn't die on the cross. Alright? That's it. He tells them, hey, I'm flesh and bones, I'm not resurrected. And these Gimps knew, because Luke, Paul, him, all that shit already happened. They know the difference between the two bodies. I mean, back then, it wasn't uncommon for weird shit to be happening. Spirits, fucking bushes burning, trees on fire, dying, 1,000 pigs go down a hill, spirits enter them, they all die. I mean, weird shit's happening, right? So they know the difference. And he's telling them, I am flesh and bones, not resurrected. So if Jesus is not a spirit, how can he be resurrected? He isn't, because he didn't die on the cross. So next, in Matthew, the Jews asked Jesus for a sign that he's the Messiah. Okay, now these are my own words. They're like, show us a fucking miracle, do some shit. I mean, the guy's in jail, right? Do something we believe, so we believe. And Jesus answers the Jews in Matthew 12:38-40. And what's interesting about how he answered it is he doesn't, I mean, think about all the shit that this guy's been doing when he's walking around, right? He doesn't, I would bring that shit up if I was him. I'd be like, hey, didn't you see me when I fucking gave everyone Mountain Dew and shit? You know what I mean? We were all drinking Mountain Dew and out of water and, I mean, everything. Everyone's getting Subway sandwiches. I'm just fucking touching pieces of bread. Everyone's eating, you know what I mean? But he doesn't do any of that, so I'm going to bring it up for him. I mean, I think he needs that, you know what I mean? Just a little respect. I mean, I don't know. If a guy's walking around doing crazy shit like that, I got to bring it up. He wouldn't do it, so I'm going to do it. He didn't bring up any of his miracles. Lazarus from the dead, bleeding woman cured, water into wine, destroying a fig tree from the roots, etc. He says, I'll only give you one fucking sign, and that is a sign of Jonah. And so, now that's just me talking, but I mean, in Matthew 12:38-40, this is what he says. Then certain of the scribes and of the Pharisees answered, saying, Master, remember that's like rabbi, preacher, bishop, we would see a sign from thee. But he answered and said unto them, an evil and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign. So he's saying, you guys, you fucking Gimps, you're so fucking shitty that someday you're going to grow up and be in an online game and HOGG's going to grief the fuck out of you. Okay? An evil and adulterous generation seeketh for a sign, you fucking cockroach Gimps. And there shall be no sign be given to it, but the sign of the prophet Jonah. And in 40 he says, for as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the fucking heart of the earth. I put fucking in there. I know that wasn't in there, but you get the idea. So he says, hey man, all the shit I've been doing since I've been fucking walking around in sandals, and I'm just, you know what, I've had it with you Gimps. Evil and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign, man. Alright, I'll give you fucks a sign. It's a sign of Jonah. Okay, and so in my own words now, to figure out what in the fuck is the sign of Jonah, alright? We must go to the book of Jonah. And so lucky for me, I'm like 7, 8 years old. The book of Jonah is one fucking page. So I'm like, oh man, hip, shitty. You know what I mean? It's one page. So I'm just gonna give you the overview. You can read it. It'll take you fucking 3 minutes to read it. It's one page, okay? But I'm gonna give you my version. You can read it yourself. But it's gonna go pretty much like this, alright? It's been a while, but this is the shit I remember. God tells Jonah to go to Nineveh and tell the people that they must repent and humble themselves before God, and he says, or I will destroy the people. Jonah, a prophet of God, decides that they will not listen, that they're not going to listen to him, and they're just going to make fun of him. They're going to, ridicule him or mock him. I'm just saying, I'm saying in my own words. So he decides, hey man, I'm a fucking gimp. I'm gonna, instead of going to Nineveh, he goes the other way and he goes to Joppa, and and takes a boat. So he's running away. Now this is a prophet. He's defying God, and he's saying, fuck that, man. I can't take the abuse. You know what I mean? I'm a gimp too. Like, if I go and I tell these gimps what you just told me to tell them, I mean, they're gonna make fun of me and shit, and I'm not in the mood for that. So I'm gonna go to Joppa, take a boat. I'm gonna run away to Tarshish. Okay. Now none of that really fucking matters. All you have to remember is that this guy was, I mean, he's a prophet, right? He's, hey, go do this. He doesn't, yeah, fuck that. I ain't doing that. He goes and does his own thing. So once he's on the boat, there's a storm, and he thinks the storm is because of what he's done by defying God, and tells the crew the storm is, it's his fault. And then he goes on to volunteer to be thrown overboard to save the crew. And he says, hey, there's no sense in everyone dying when he is the only one that should die. You know what I'm saying? Like, you guys don't need to die because I defied God, and I know he's pissed, and so we got a storm and shit, deadliest catch type shit, and just throw me over, dude. I'm willing. You know what I mean? You don't have to break my arms or anything. Just fucking throw me over, and then I'm sure you guys will be, spared. So the crew tells him, hey man, that shit ain't necessary. We don't think that this storm's because of you. I mean, you're kind of a bizarre meatball. You know what I mean? I mean, you're a little bit of a fucking oddball. Are you one of those Christian gimps? No, they don't say that. But I mean, I'm sure. You know what I mean? If I'm on the boat, I'm like, dude, what the fuck? We're out on the seas. There's storms all the time, and we don't call you and say it's your fault. You know what I mean? But here you are, a fucking stupid gimp, saying that it's your fault the storm. So they said, hey, all right. So they try to put him at ease, and they're like, hey, look, man, we got our own way of figuring out if you're the reason or not for the storm. And back then, their system was called the casting of lots. The casting of lots. So what that meant was kind of similar to just tossing a fucking coin, right? Heads or tails. So they cast the lots. It comes up fucking tails, and they determine that he is the reason. So they're like, fuck this, and they throw him overboard. So right after they toss his stupid ass overboard, the storm subsided immediately. And now I want you to remember that he volunteered to be thrown overboard. So he was alive when they threw him over. It's very important. They didn't break his arms or make it harder on him than, it had to be. He volunteered, so they're like, yeah, just throw his fucking gimp ass overboard. You know what I mean? One less guy eating the oranges and shit, less scurvy, whatever. I mean, they threw the fucking bones down and it came up snake eyes. They fucking chucked his stupid ass over. But I need you to remember that he volunteered to be thrown overboard, so he was alive when they threw him overboard. And then what happens? A fucking whale gobbles him up, swims around the sea for 3 days and 3 nights, and vomits him out on the seashore alive. Right? That's important. So he's alive when they throw him over. He's in this fucking whale for 3 days, suffocating and shit. It's probably hot in there. It's not comfortable. Right? I mean, this is your book. This is your shit. So you believe it. So he's in the fish. I mean, I'm accepting it. You know what I mean? They say he can be in a fish. All right, I'm saying, all right, it's fine. I mean, I don't think I could be in a fish for 3 days, but fuck, you say he wasn't a fish. You know what I mean? So they spit him out, and so that's the miracle. If you toss a gimp into the sea and he lives, it's always going to be a miracle, okay? Because if he dies, it's not a miracle. You expect the gimp to die. You throw a motherfucker over. You've seen Deadliest Catch. You throw a gimp overboard, you pretty much, hey, that's all she wrote. You know what I mean? It's a wrap. So, but he lives. Spits out, the whole deal, the story goes. That's a miracle, right? It's a miracle, man. Alright? He's supposed to, I'm with you on it. If you believe that shit, that is a miracle. Alright, so, in verse 40, he says, that's what Jesus says, and I'm quoting, for as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Right? So, he says he's going to be like, remember that? Like Jonah. Not unlike, like. So, how is Jonah inside the the belly of the well. He was alive. How was Jesus inside the tomb? He was dead. Okay. Whoa, wait, what the fuck? Okay, let me say that again. Inside, so Jonas is spit out of the well on the shore and he's alive. Jesus goes into the tomb and he's dead. So, what the fuck? Did he fulfill the sign? No. Remember, Gimp, what was the sign? They crucified Jesus on a Friday, which is known as Good Friday. Christians say Jesus was dead for 3 days in the tomb. If that were true, he would be unlike Jonah. And he said he would be like Jonah, alive for 3 days and 3 nights. So, is your guy lying? Is Jesus a liar, or are you lying? Like, who? Which one of you fucks is lying? Because he said he'd be like. This is unlike. He's fucking dead in the tomb. Jonah's alive, and dead. Totally different. Unlike. So, I mean, which one of you fucks is lying? Alright, we'll move on. We're going to save that for, a couple minutes or whatever. So let's get into when he was crucified, alright? So when was Jesus crucified? Christianity as a whole will tell you it's on Good Friday, alright? So at what time was he crucified? Some say morning, some say afternoon. I mean, I've asked Gimps, you know what I mean? I say, all right. I mean, no one agrees on shit, so I'm just gonna. I don't argue. You know what I mean? I just say, okay, yeah, all right. You say morning. This fucking guy says afternoon. Fuck it. I'll accept it. And then, how long was he on? I would ask, how long was he? I mean, any of you Gimps know how long he was fucking on the cross? I mean, what? And some Gimps say 3 hours. Some preacher Gimps say 6 hours. I say, all right, whatever. I'm not gonna argue. You fucks have no idea, but I mean, I'll accept it. So now, another thing that's odd is, I don't know if you Gimps know, but the Jews were in a hurry to get Jesus on the cross, okay? They were in a hurry. And why? Why were they in a hurry? Because the Jews feared that Gimps, because Jesus was a hero to the common Gimp. I mean, think about it. He fed 5,000 Gimps with a few pieces of fish, a few pieces of bread. The Gimps loved such a man, and if his life was in danger, the Gimps might revolt. So the Jews take Jesus to Pilate early in the morning, and Pilate says, "Hey man, fuck that shit. That's not my, you know what I mean? That's a little out of my fucking pay grade. Take him to Herod, King Herod." So they take him to Herod, and Herod says, "Hey man, this shit, I'm not. It's not my shit. Take him to Pilate." So I'm supposed to accept that all these things, they don't fucking happen in real life, right? But we're led to believe that Pilate and Herod were just sitting around fucking off, waiting for something like this to pop up, on them during the normal day. So you believe that shit, that he can just fucking go in and out and see Pilate and Herod in a couple hours or whatever, first in line and shit. I don't believe it, but hey, I'll accept it, okay? So, why were the Jews in a hurry? So the Jews were in a hurry to get Jesus on the cross, and just as much in a hurry to bring him down. Do you know why, Gimp? Because the Jews were told in Deuteronomy that nobody was to be hanging on the tree on the Sabbath day. The Sabbath day begins at 6 p.m. on Friday. According to the Muslims and the Jews, their days begin at sunset, not sunrise. I'm going to say that again. According to the Muslims and the Jews, their days begin at sunset, not sunrise. So my first thing is, what do they do with him once they take him down off the cross, alright? This is what Gimps tell me. The Jews perform a burial wash on Jesus. This takes, we're just two guys talking here. This takes about 1 or 2 hours. Most Gimps agree on that, okay? Second thing they do is they wrap him in 100 pounds of burial cloth. Now, I don't know how long that fucking takes, but that ain't no fucking 3-minute task, you know what I mean? Third thing, the Jews wrap him in that fucking shroud you guys like and place him in the tomb. So let's go over this shit, alright? So you're saying that on Friday night, he's supposed to be in the grave, okay? Alright, I'll take that. Saturday day, he's supposed to be in the grave. Saturday night, he's supposed to be in the grave. Sunday morning, Mary Magdalene goes to the tomb and it's empty. So he's in the grave Friday night. He's in the grave Saturday day. He's in the grave Saturday night. So by my calculations, you fucking cockroach Gimp, he's in the grave 2 nights and 1 day. Right? He's in the grave 2 nights and 1 day. What the fuck is that? Jonas was 3 days and 3 nights. He's 2 nights, 1 day. I don't give a fuck. If you got that guy in the wheelchair, you resurrect that fuck. He does the math. You know that one fucking guy. 2 nights, 1 day, 3 days, 3 nights. If that guy comes back, he's gonna do the math for you, and that shit is unlike Jonah. 2 days, 1 night, or 2 nights, 1 day, and 3 days, 3 nights. That's unlike Jonah. So I used your shit. What I'm gonna tell you from here on is why I'm right and the Christians are wrong. You fucking Christian Gimps are wrong. Okay, let's go back to Thursday. Let's just simplify this shit, alright? Let's go back to Thursday before he was crucified. On Thursday, Jesus takes his disciples to that upper room. Remember that fucking upper room? It keeps coming up. And they eat supper. While they're eating, Jesus asks them, remember when I sent you out on that message of preaching and healing, and I told you not to carry anything with you? No papers, no stabs, no shoes. You remember that shit? And then he asks them, hey, did you lack anything? And they said no. Now I tell those of you that have swords, sell your garments and buy swords. So he's telling them, hey man, sell your fucking clothes. If you want to run around with me, run around bare nuts, as long as you got a sword. Why? One of the disciples pops up and is like, hey man, I don't need to sell my underwear. You know what I'm saying? We already have 2 swords. So Jesus says, okay, hey man, that'll be enough. You know what I mean? You can keep your underwear on because, I mean, you're nuts. You know what I mean? We don't need to expose that shit to the public right now. It might fuck with our message. You know what I mean? So that's me saying that. Now in Luke 19:27, this is what he says. This is what Jesus says. But those mine enemies, which would not that I should reign over them, bring hither and slay them before me. What in the fuck is he talking? He wants to kill people now. So he goes on to tell the disciples to arm themselves with swords. Why? Why would he do that? And I say because he's going to protect himself from the Jews. That's why. That's why he needs swords all of a sudden. So here's another thing. Why does Jesus take the disciples to the Garden of Gethsemane? Right? He could have easily gone to the temple in Jerusalem. It was a stone throw away from the mansion in that upper room. It's because this was Jesus' strategy. He takes them in the middle of the night, not for prayer. Why would he do that? He puts 8 men at the gates and tells them to steady themselves for battle, to guard. He takes Peter and the 2 fighting Irish brothers, and these fucking guys said that their name was the Sons of Thunder. Why is he taking these guys in the middle of the night to a garden, and he makes an inner line of defense? He says, sit here ye and watch with me. Watch what? What? He means keep guard. Guard this shit. And Jesus went a little further and fell on his face and prayed to God. He prays, save me, but if I must die, I will. And he prayed as if blood from his brow. I've had some like dedication to Gimps and shit, but I've never like thought that blood was going to come out of my forehead when I'm griefing Gimps. So that's some serious praying, you know what I mean? So supposedly Christian Gimps, they believe that God made a choice. God supposedly made a contract before Father and Son, before the world began, says the Christians. God supposedly says, Son, I'll send you into the world in the year 4000 after Adam, and I want you to die for the sins of mankind. Alright? Now that's what the Christian Gimp believes. But this is not what it looks like to me. It looks like Jesus is acting like he doesn't know anything about this fucking contract at all. I mean, think about it. Is this how you prepare for suicide or sacrifice? No. It's not. These disciples were prepared to die for Jesus. But unfortunately for Jesus, the Jews were smarter than Jesus' plan, and the Jews sent Roman soldiers instead. to Gethsemane to the garden. At this point, Jesus sees all these fucking Romans. He sees that he's got a couple guys with swords. He does have those Irish motherfuckers, but he knows that it's a wrap. You know what I mean? He knows they're gonna lose. So he surrenders, and this is when he says the famous, "He who lives by the sword dies by the sword." So every action Jesus takes is that of a man that has escaped death by the skin of his nuts, not someone who has been resurrected. And that concludes Inside the Mind of a Gimp, Volume 8, Christian Gimps. Till next time, hog for life.